So let's continue with this concept of the opposite theory, right? And then consider, you know, I'm gonna live this opposite lifestyle and all this stuff. But then you have to consider, how do you manage this? How do you regulate this? How do you live a life like this? You have, it's sort of like if no means yes, then you know, how do you go about living life? If you're living your opposite lifestyle, then if no means yes, shouldn't you be walking backwards? Shouldn't you be standing like on your head or your face? Or shouldn't you be speaking a different, like language or even the way that you think? Shouldn't the way that you think be like backwards and you have to switch all this stuff and all these things, right? And then you have people who are like, whoa, that might be an interesting way to live. And what do you do? Well, do you force the way that you live on other people? Do you try to do all these things and then potentially hurt, manipulate, abuse people because you want to win, because you want to live your opposite lifestyle? All this stuff. And then, what happens if another individual wants to live their opposite lifestyle, you know, and now it's your turn to respect the individual. And sometimes this whole opposite theory stuff, it might lead to people getting hurt. It's not a good thing. Then it's like, well, you hurt me, now I'm going to use the Constitution. But if your whole lifestyle is opposite, that means you can't use the Constitution. Oh, but you can't do that, blah blah blah. Then you get into this dispute. And so like, oh, well, I'm only going to use opposite sometimes. Then you got to consider this whole implied consent thing, right? So what do you do? Well, how do you manage that? And some people are like, opposite, implied consent, not complied, whatever consent, and blah blah blah. And it's sort of like, well, yeah, but just because you understand, just because uh, respect or address an individual doesn't mean you're gonna encourage that individual, manipulate that individual, use that individual, abuse that individual, hurt that individual, or do anything dumb or illegal or stupid. You know, but then it's like, hey, I really respect this whole, what is it? For every action is an equal and opposite reaction. You can't prove me wrong, and second and third. And it's just annoying. It's just this whole living an opposite lifestyle. Um, I wouldn't advise it. I just wouldn't advise it. I really wouldn't. Because people could get. Imagine if someone who had a lot of wealth, power, status, social clout. It's like a political clout. You're hurting people in the name of what, the opposite theory and stuff, and then it's like, well, we're gonna develop these different definitions, terms, and synonyms, and all this other stuff, just to thrive, to hurt, to rob and steal, and then no, not maybe somewhere else, but not in the United States. The Constitution is beautiful because literally a moment of silence, and you've used the Constitution. Two, the Constitution can also defend you, and three, the Constitution can convict you. But how does a moment of silence relate to the Fifth Amendment, the First Amendment, and the Second Amendment, right? 5A, 1A, 2A. Well, if you're ever in an argument, maybe you're, or in a dispute, or having a conversation, or even not having a conversation, or whatever, then it's sort of like, well, I'm going to have some privacy. Which my privacy is also a form of expression, which is the First Amendment, right? Liberty, right? Freedom. And you ever get into an argument or might get in trouble, you stop speaking? Well, maybe that might be a way to bear arms. Silence. So you have to decide. What do you want to do? You can't choose both sides. And I started to think, well, what if individuals actually live this way? What if, you have the Saw movie, you have the Purge movie, and related movies, even V for Vendetta, What about that type of stuff? What if these are examples of how the opposite, and all this recklessness, lawlessness, and anarchy might have gotten uh, just out of control. What if, right? All these different concepts. So you have to decide, and what's beautiful about the United States Constitution is that it protects you from all this theory and stuff like that. And then it's like, well, if you're in the government and you're law enforcement, what happens and stuff like that, and it's beautiful because some individuals take this really seriously. Other individuals don't care about it because it's not not a real thing or whatever. And, but some individuals take public safety very seriously, and I don't know. That's the beauty of the United States Constitution. And some individuals are like, oh no, so Isaac Newton was clearly right, and this, that, and the third. And then ironically, I'm from Connecticut, which is a beautiful thing. And I remember when the Connecticut state quarters arrived, and every state had their own symbol to represent um, their quarter. And what's beautiful is that on the Connecticut state quarter there is a charter oak tree, which is beautiful because if you consider it, you have the beginning of the charter oak tree, the premise, and then over a matter of time, particular amount of time, it sprouts, and then it continues to develop, and then once it begins to peak and live its life and pursue its noble pursuit, um, then you have all these branches, all this variability, and according to the whole Sir Isaac Newton, for every action leads an equal and opposite reaction. In theory, maybe that charter oak tree should have never been developed, or maybe if it was developed, then it should have been just a straight line up, or a square up, or all this stuff. But what's beautiful is that if you look at a tree, and it kind of looks like a statistical analysis, right? It looks like a tree diagram. You have the significant event, and then you have a control group, and then from there you have all this beautiful variability, and then with that variability, it's your decision to pursue as you wish. And the beauty of the Connecticut State Quarter is it says Charter Oak, Charter, this beautiful concept, this beautiful premise, all this beauty, and I think of oak, I think of one of a kind. Charter this beautiful premise, this beautiful tree diagram, whatever that might be, and make it one of a kind. And when you've reached your a particular point of variability, maybe the tipping point or homeostasis, well, there's also a wall right there at the ending of the quarter, which is saying once you get to a certain point, you can decide to stop, or to say, you know what, this was this environment. Now I'm gonna have another premise and develop another quarter, and all this beautiful stuff, right? And it's beautiful. And then there's even a boundary around the quarter, which sort of says this for this particular environment, I'm gonna have this idea, this premise, and I'm gonna charter it. I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna develop it to make it one of a kind. And once it gets to a particular point, I'll allow it to reach homeostasis, and then I'll continue to do that. And it's just beautiful, And from there, I actually started to think, how does the charter oak tree, right? How does the Connecticut State Quarter and this whole idea of combating anarchy and this whole what if individuals and governments and societies really had this whole, equal and opposite lifestyle, the opposite theory. And I just started to develop this stuff, and it's a leadership model, basically, a strategic leadership model that basically tells you what you're already doing, but just confirms it. And from here on out, I'll continue to develop and just explore what does it mean to really use the concept of the Connecticut State Quarter, of this tree diagram. How does that relate to increasing quality of life? How does that relate to empowering to promote independence? How does that relate to public safety, social Darwinism, and all technology and life and love and beauty and the environment and maybe even politics and stuff like that. It's a very beautiful thing, and I hope you would enjoy, you know, this video, and I hope you would, follow me and send me emails and send me tweets and find me on Google Plus, and share these ideas and share this story and just, you know, just live this beautiful, live this with me, enjoy it with me. I just want to share it with you, and I hope that you would accept that. And yeah, we'll see. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy. And yeah, all right.